Morning everyone, it's movie review time. The Irishman, directed by Martin Scorsese and starring Robert de Niro, Al Pacino and Joe Pesci. What's it like? Is it any good? Should you spend your money? Stick around and you'll find out. Now I suppose the first thing to say is, can you see it if you haven't got Netflix? Well, it is getting a limited theatrical release due to some disputes, I believe, between Netflix and the film distribution companies. So I think you will be able to see it on the cinema, but not for very long. And if you haven't got Netflix, well, you're rather stuck. So I suppose the first point to make is it worth getting Netflix to watch The Irishman? And the simple answer to that is yes. Even if you buy Netflix for a year and the only thing you watch is The Irishman, I think it's worth it. The Irishman is that good. It is a superb film. Okay, why is it a superb film? Well, the first thing is it's a Martin Scorsese film, and Martin Scorsese knows how to make movies. He's been making them for, I don't know, I probably saw Taxi Driver and what was his first film? Mean Streets, I think, which was about 1972, 73, something like that. So that makes the best part of 50 years, probably longer he's been making movies, so he knows what he's doing. And he has surrounded himself with some superb actors, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, to name just a few. Now, what is The Irishman about? Well, the first thing to say is Al Pacino plays Jimmy Hoffa. Jimmy Hoffa was he was, I suppose you could say, the American trade union leader of his time. He was the leader of the Teamsters, which was principally a trucking union, not exclusively. And he was born in about 1913 and disappeared in about 1975. So his heyday, I suppose, was the 50s and the 60s. Robert De Niro plays a truck driver who, through a series of various events, comes across Joe Pesci, who plays a mob gangster, and through Joe Pesci's influence and recommendation becomes a kind of bodyguard and subsequent friend to Jimmy Hoffa. And it charts Jimmy Hoffa's period as leader of the Teamsters, his interactions with the mob and his subsequent demise. And it charts this through the story that Robert De Niro tells while he's in a wheelchair in an old people's home towards the end of his life. And what makes it so good is a number of reasons. First of all, it's very similar in tone to Goodfellas and Godfather Part 2. So it has that sweep, it has that ability to take time to tell a story. It doesn't rush things. But that's not to say it's slow. The film is the best part of 3.5 hours long, and it does not drag at any point at all. I watched it with my son last night. We started it and we had a little break for dinner, but we watched it straight through. And we didn't feel that we had, that there were any longers. Good word, that, isn't it? There were no longers in the film. It was just perfectly paced. The acting is uniformly superb, but I would make one point, and that is Jimmy Hoffa was not Italian. Jimmy Hoffa was American. I dare say he had Irish ancestry. And if there's one thing that Al Pacino is not, it is Irish. And he plays Jimmy Hoffa as an Italian American. In other words, very much the same characters as he plays in The Godfather, Donnie Brasco, and some of his other films. Is it Donnie Brasco? I'm not sure if it is Donnie Brasco. There's a film in which he plays a mafia gangster alongside Johnny Depp, which I think is Donnie Brasco, but it may not be. Anyway, he plays a very similar character to that. And he plays it superbly. It is a wonderful Al Pacino, over the top, but not too florid performance. But it is a performance as an Italian-American gangster, not as a Jimmy Hoffa. So you can suspend your disbelief long enough to believe you're watching Jimmy Hoffa, but there's a still nagging feeling at the back of your mind where you're thinking, hang on a minute, Jimmy Hoffa wasn't Italian. What is this? But no matter, it is a bravura performance. The key performance, though, is Robert de Niro, who is in pretty much every scene of the film. It starts off with him in the old people's home looking back, and then he flashbacks to the various scenes throughout the film, and it ends with him back in the old people's home. So he is in the film, he dominates the film, he produces the film. He was obviously the key driver, along with Martin Scorsese, in the film, and he is superb. He plays Frank Sheeran, the Irishman of the title, great-grandfather, I believe, of Ed, the singer in later life. Well, no, he's a singer in life now, isn't he? And Frank Sheeran, well, again, Robert De Niro is primarily known for playing Italian Americans. He doesn't make, I think, any attempt at an Irish accent. I didn't know Frank Sheeran. I don't know his great-grandson. Come to that. But whether he had an Irish accent or not, one rather suspects that having been called the Irishman, it wasn't just a nickname. He was called that because he was Irish and he had an Irish accent. Robert De Niro doesn't have an Irish accent. Does that matter? Well, no, it doesn't. The other standout performance is Joe Pesci. Now, you will remember Joe Pesci from Goodfellas in particular. Am I a clown? Are you laughing at me? Am I a clown? Do I amuse you? Do you remember? Not a very good impression, I know, but you'll remember that scene from Goodfellas. And in this, he plays a mobster, an elderly mobster, looking back again. Well, not looking back, but there is a scene that kind of runs through the film where they are in later life, all of them. And the thing about Joe Pesci's performance in this is he doesn't, to my recollection, kill anybody, but there is such menace in the way he looks at people. He has these great big glasses, a bit like mine actually, only bigger and darker, but there's a way in which he looks at people that makes your blood run cold. It is a absolutely brilliant performance. Other performances one should note is Stephen Graham. Now, you remember him. Stephen Graham appeared, well, he's appeared in lots of things, but one of the earliest things that I saw him in was Boardwalk Empire, directed by, yes, Martin Scorsese, in which he plays Al Capone, an Italian-American. Now, Stephen Graham, as I'm sure you know, is not American, he's not Italian-American, he's English. He's from Basildon or Essex or something like that, but he seems to have made a career playing little short, fat, can I say fat? Little short, slightly overweight, podgy guy. So that's what Al Capone was. And in this he plays Tony, is it Tony? Yeah, Tony Provolino, I think, who was an Italian-American mobster. And he plays him very well. I'm just checking my notes here. Harvey Keitel is in it. He has a fairly small but key role as a top gangster. And Jesse Plemons from Breaking Bad, who seems to be in everything these days. He was actually in Floyd Landis when he played in that film with the film about Lance Armstrong. He plays Jimmy Hoffa's adopted son. I didn't know Jimmy Hoffa's adopted son, so it's difficult to tell. I'm not sure I particularly believed in his performance, but it didn't really matter. It's not a big performance, it doesn't matter. Anna Paquin is in it, who, you remember, wasn't she in The Piano as a child? Now, I think she plays De Niro's daughter, but I'm not 100% certain. The other person, or the other two people I wanted to mention, who are not performers, or not precisely performers in the film, but are also long-term collaborators with Martin Scorsese, and that's Robbie Robertson of the band, who does the music, and Thelma Schoonmaker, who is Scorsese's film editor and has been editing his films pretty much as far back as Mean Streets, as far as I can remember. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention, and this you've probably seen in some of the other reviews, is Pesci and De Niro and Pacino are quite old now, and there are scenes in this film in which they have to play people who are younger. Now, normally what happens in a film is that somebody who is young plays in somebody who is young is made up then to play somebody as they get older. And if they have to show an old person as young, they usually use a different actor. Now, you wouldn't want to do that with Pesci and Pacino and De Niro. So what they have done is use a form of CGI to make their faces look younger. Now, I don't know if you ever saw that Dad's Army episode where there is a decision made that only younger people can be in the Home Guard. And so Private Jones and Godfrey and Fraser put on a whole load of makeup and paint their hair black and put cotton wool in their mouths to try and hide the lines on their face. Anyway, they try and appear younger, and then there's a rainstorm and all the paint drips away and so on and so forth. It's very funny. It's very funny. There are some moments in this. I felt that De Niro looked young, or younger, in a believable way, but Pesci didn't. My son Joel actually thought the opposite. He thought that Pesci looked believably younger, but Robert De Niro didn't. So you watch the film and you make your own decisions. So it doesn't interfere with your enjoyment of the film, and once you see it and you say, oh, okay, all right, fair enough, this is Joe Pesci trying to make it look a bit younger. His eyebrows seem a little bit too dark, his face seems a little bit too Richter-y, can you say that? A little bit like somebody who's received Botox. But anyway, they are both excellent performances. You can get beyond the CGI. It doesn't matter that much. I'm just checking my notes here if there's something else I needed to mention. Oh, yes. Jimmy Hoffa has been appeared in a couple of films before, and he'd been played previously in 1992 by Jack Nicholson in a film that I think I saw on late night television. Didn't see all of, but really enjoyed. So one of these days I must dig it out. The other thing I wanted to mention about The Irishman, I'm sorry if this review is going on, it's a bit rambling, but it shows these characters as they get old. Now, perhaps as somebody who's getting old himself, it's interesting to see how films approach this. And the film has a long, I suppose you'd call coda, where Robert De Niro, at the end of his life, is in the care home, and it's probably about 10 or 15 minutes. He meets the priest, he says some prayers, he talks a little bit. He doesn't explain to the priest, he doesn't confess all of his crimes from the past, but you see him in decline. And in a sense, the whole film is about people in decline. It's not so much about how America changes or even has changed. I don't know whether the Teamsters are still corrupt. In fact, I wouldn't go so far as to say so on YouTube. But it shows how things have changed and how the influence of the mob has changed. All these people died, they were either shot or they died from natural causes, and Frank Sheeran seems to have died from natural causes. So it shows a long decline, which I suppose sums up all of our lives, but it shows it in a beautiful way. So you can watch this film as a meditation on the power of the unions, on the link between unions and the mob. You can see it as a kind of biography of Jimmy Hoffa. Frank Sheeran and the others, as far as I can tell, were all real people. There was certainly a book on which this film is based, which is called How I Paint Houses. And it's called How I Paint Houses because of something that Frank Sheeran does for a living, and it's not painting houses, but I'll leave that there. I don't want to spoil the film for you completely. So, to sum up, is The Irishman worth seeing? Absolutely. It is a truly superb film. Now, I've seen quite a few good films this year. I thought Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was a really, really good film. It's very difficult to compare films, but the sweep of this film, the depth of this film, the power of its storytelling, the power of its acting, the music, not just the original music by Robbie Robertson, but the choice of songs from the early 60s, which Martin Scorsese has always done brilliantly. You'll remember that scene from Goodfellas where, what's his name? Anyway, when they walk into the Copacabana and the song plays, my memory's going, but anyway, you'll remember that scene. And there are scenes in this which are bracketed or backgrounded with absolutely superb music tunes. So, should you go and see it? Absolutely. Is it worth getting a Netflix subscription for, even for a year? Absolutely. Is Netflix the future of cinema? Well, that's a different story. Does it work as Martin Scorsese's opus? Is it the best film he's ever made? Well, it's certainly up there with Goodfellas. Is it the best thing that De Niro has ever done? Yes and no. It's a great performance, but he's done other great performances. Is it the best thing that Pesci and Al Pacino have done? Well, as an ensemble, where they all get together, this group of aging American cultural behemoths, to produce something of absolutely extraordinary ability and joy, then yes, this is the film. Go and see it. Don't miss it. Thanks very much. See you next time.